The relationship between former President Donald J. Trump and music mogul Shawn "Diddy" Combs has shifted from public friendliness to open hostility, and, according to several sources close to the matter, that shift could have serious consequences for Combs's already precarious legal situation. What began as whispers about a potential presidential pardon has turned into an unmistakable message. There will be no leniency, and the outcome in court should be as severe as the law allows. The pivot, insiders say, was triggered not simply by the charges against Combs, but by personal history. In private conversations, Trump has made it clear he viewed Combs's refusal to support him during last year's election, and, allegedly, disparaging remarks made behind the scenes, as a personal betrayal. This was especially pointed given the two men's long history in the same social and business circles, from New York's luxury real estate events to the celebrity charity galas of the early 2000s. Trump, who in the past had called Combs a good guy and pledged to stick up for him, has now publicly dismissed any talk of a pardon. In one recent interview, he described Combs as someone he had once liked, but who had made some terrible statements during Trump's political campaigns. "It makes it more difficult to do," Trump admitted, before all but confirming that a pardon was not on the table. The remarks were not without precedent. Combs had made no secret of his opposition to Trump's presidency. In 2017, he told an interviewer that Black Americans were in the same messed-up position, regardless of who occupied the White House, dismissing what he described as the tomfoolery going on in D.C. as routine for his community. In 2020, he went further in a widely publicized radio interview, declaring that the #1 priority for the country should be removing Trump from office. That public stance may have been politically calculated at the time, but in the current context, it has taken on a new significance. Sources familiar with the case say that Trump's comments are more than idle talk, that they coincide with a harder line from the bench. Judge Aaron, who is presiding over Combs's case, recently denied the defense's fifth request for bail, despite a proposed $50 million bond backed by Combs's Miami mansion. In his written decision, the judge concluded that Combs remained both a flight risk and a potential danger to the community, citing the legal standard requiring clear and convincing evidence to the contrary. The stakes for Combs are considerable. He was convicted on 2 counts of violating the Mann Act, the federal law that makes it a crime to transport individuals across state lines for unlawful sexual activity. Each count carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison, meaning that, in theory, he faces up to 2 decades behind bars. Before Trump's intervention, most legal observers expected a far lighter outcome, given Combs's status as a first-time offender, and the nearly year-long period he has already spent in detention. Probation or a sentence of time served had seemed plausible. Now, with a former president reportedly advocating for the maximum allowable punishment, those earlier predictions may be obsolete. The defense has not abandoned its efforts. In addition to the bail motions, Combs's attorneys have filed a motion to vacate the guilty verdicts, or, failing that, to secure a new trial. In their brief, they emphasized the unusual nature of the prosecution, noting that Combs had no commercial motive, that all involved were adults, and that the men chose to travel and engage in the activity voluntarily. They also pointed to the jury's rejection of any claim that the women involved had been exploited or trafficked. But few close to the proceedings believe Judge Aaron is likely to overturn the verdict, particularly under the current political glare. The story is complicated by the long and very public history between Trump and Combs. In the early 2000s, Trump described Combs as a friend, praising him on television appearances and social events. Even as recently as a few years ago, when asked about Combs's legal troubles, Trump had hinted that a pardon might not be out of the question. That hint, say people familiar with the matter, sparked quiet efforts inside Combs's camp to make the possibility a reality. Those efforts reportedly included discreet meetings, high-value fundraising, and even discussions of potential political donations. According to one court insider, Combs's name had been discussed during a period when the White House was preparing a string of celebrity pardons. The strategy, this person said, was to first announce other high-profile clemencies, including NBA player Youngboy Never Broke Again for weapons charges and reality television personalities Todd and Julie Chrisley for financial crimes, before sliding Diddy's name into the mix. But the plan, if it existed, never materialized. There were also rumors of a more controversial element. Several sources alleged that federal investigators had approached Combs with a deal: cooperation in ongoing probes into figures in entertainment and politics in exchange for reduced charges or a recommendation for clemency. Among the names said to have been mentioned were prominent media personalities and political donors. Most explosively, some claimed Combs had access to damaging information about Trump himself, connected to the long-rumored and closely guarded Epstein list of individuals linked to the late financier Jeffrey Epstein. The allegations, which included a now-deleted tweet from Elon Musk claiming Trump's inclusion on those files, have been publicly denied by Trump, who has called them old news and insisted he had cut ties with Epstein nearly 2 decades before his death. Whether or not Combs attempted to leverage any such information, the outcome has been the opposite of what he might have hoped. Rather than softening, the rhetoric from Trump's camp has hardened, and the courtroom tone has grown more severe. What some in Combs's circle once viewed as an inside track to a pardon has become, in the words of one associate, a straight line to the harshest sentence they can get away with. Only weeks ago, those same associates had projected confidence, even acting, according to one source, like it was only a matter of time before Combs walked free. That confidence has now dissolved into urgency. The prospect of the maximum sentence, 20 years in federal prison, no longer seems remote. With bail denied, the motion for a new trial unlikely to succeed, and political pressure surrounding the case intensifying, the defense is running out of moves. For Combs, the collapse of the pardon narrative is more than a legal setback. His career and public image, already battered by the convictions and the underlying allegations, are now overshadowed by a political feud with a former president who commands both a loyal base and a global media platform. The combination of legal jeopardy, political antagonism, and public scrutiny has created a situation in which the usual tools of celebrity crisis management, careful public statements, strategic interviews, charitable appearances, are unlikely to make a dent. As sentencing approaches, the calculations have changed. What was once a question of how quickly Combs could return to his life outside prison is now a question of how much of that life will be spent inside. The Miami mansion he offered as bond will remain empty. The $50 million guarantee will sit unused. And the man who once moved effortlessly between the worlds of music, business, and politics will face his next appearance in court, not as an icon to be celebrated, but as a defendant awaiting a judgment that could define the rest of his life.